Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning podcast. This is a review number 768 with a review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're talking about a film that came to a theater near the rest of us, but also came to a theater near Stephen while he was in France at the Cannes Film Festival. And he is back in good old San Francisco. We are sitting down to record our first official review that we've done for a little while. Are you excited to get into it, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be honest, I have not thought about Furiosa in almost 2 full weeks, but I think I'll be able to remember it real quickly.
The funny thing, too, is like in any normal given situation, like if you hadn't thought about a movie for 2 weeks, it would have just been 2 weeks since you saw that movie. But in this case, right, you saw like 30 other movies in between Furiosa.
Exactly. Yes. I've completely overloaded my memory. Like whatever was in the cache for Furiosa is now just in like long-term storage. And hopefully I'll be able to pull it out over the course of this episode.
Well, we're going to see, because I'm going to test you on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please do. Please do. I will say, because I wrote a review for David Chen's Decoding Everything newsletter the night that Furiosa premiered. And, you know, it was a blur, right? It was late at night. I had just attended the premiere. And I was a little terrified that when this movie actually came out, people would look back over what I wrote and be like, oh, my God, he was completely fucking wrong about, like, every detail. But I did. I read over it again just a couple nights ago. And it seems like my take is similar to what a lot of critics who saw it in a theater this last weekend had. So I feel like I was retaining some information that night somehow. Like I didn't see anything that was too embarrassing, at least, which is, you know, the best I can hope for.
Yeah, there was no like fundamental misunderstanding of what was happening in the universe or anything.
Exactly, because you never know. I mean, I have come dangerously close before to like being sure that a certain actor was in a movie or that a certain plot thing happened, and then realizing like, oh no, I'm completely wrong. Yeah. You know, when you're just mainlining movies back to back for so long, you have trouble keeping track of details.
Cool. Well, Stephen, we got a long night ahead of us. In addition to this episode, we're recording the part 2 of the Cannes recap. So should we just start our engines and put the pedal to the floor and just head off into this review?
Yes, let's witness each other as we dive in, debate, discuss Furiosa.
All right, cool. We are going to play the trailer for Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, while Stephen and I put our foreheads together and embrace each other. And then when the trailer ends, we're going to come back and give everybody a review.
Furiosa! We've come too far. Furiosa! They took Furiosa!
As a child, my world was forever changed. My mother was magnificent. And he took it all from me.
Who do we have here?
She's from a place of abundance. This is our destiny.
My childhood. My mother. I want them back. I want them back!
Whatever you have to do, however long it takes, promise you'll find your way home. Protect the green place.
It's time to take what's rightfully ours! Ready? Steady! Go! Where are you going? So full of hope! There is no hope!
If you find him, he's mine.
always be war, but to get home, Furiosa fought the world.
Remember me.
All right, so that was the trailer for Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. And it's basically the origin story of Furiosa and kind of takes us from kind of the events of her childhood to the point that starts Mad Max Fury Road. Stephen Miller, what did you think, but to the best of your memory, of Furiosa, Mad Max Saga?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned briefly in part one of my Cannes coverage, we talked just a little bit about my feelings on this movie too. How way back in 2015 when Mad Max Fury Road came out, I liked Mad Max Fury Road quite a bit, but I did not adore it the way most people adored it. And I think that's really because I just didn't know or care enough about action as a genre to fully appreciate what George Miller had done compared to other movies. And I recently revisited Fury Road as well as all of the Mel Gibson movies in preparation for seeing Furiosa at Cannes. And Mad Max Fury Road is fucking masterpiece. Like, it's amazing. It's an incredible movie. And what makes it incredible is that it is so distilled, right? It is just the idea of action in a like incredibly tight package. They're driving one direction, they turn around, they drive the other direction. That is the whole movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Like it's amazing. The choreography is brilliant. There are many times in the movie where it becomes this kind of dreamy ballet where it just feels like transcendent chaos. You know, there's something really incredible about it. And Furiosa like was never going to repeat that. Like, I knew that there's no way a prequel was going to just do that same thing again. And so going in to see Furiosa, my main hope was that it doesn't fuck up, right? Like, it doesn't make the first movie worse in any way.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't do the Han Solo type thing. And it definitely doesn't. Like, I think George Miller nailed it with this movie. It is a prequel, like very much a prequel. I think I told you in our Cannes episode that this has a lot of the how did Han Solo get the name Solo type moments, like little things that are telling you why did this happen, where did this come from. You know, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say we will learn about the green place, we'll learn about Furiosa's arm, we'll learn about like even the man's nipple clamps, like we're going to learn about in this movie. But somehow it all works. At least it worked for me incredibly well. And I think it's because, the world that George Miller built is just really cool. Like, I like this mix of very campy, ridiculous villains and a genuinely fleshed out universe of all the different places in the wasteland that people would live and the different ways they try to survive. And also, I think it is still very tight. Like, even though it is not predominantly an action movie, it is very much focused on momentum. Like, Furiosa, at least the part played by Anya Taylor-Joy, which doesn't come for a long time into this movie, like to a point that I think would surprise a lot of people, given the trailer is, you know, highlighting her as the star. Even when she appears, she does not speak very much. Like, if I remember right, she only had like a few dozen lines of dialogue in this movie. Like, this is not a plot type movie. This is still a very kind of, as much as it's a grand saga of the life of Furiosa, each point in that grand saga is still pretty like simple and clearly articulated and easy to follow. And I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it deepened the universe of Mad Max in a way that I liked. When the action does come, I think the action is pretty fucking awesome. I remember a scene in particular where Furiosa is on the underside of a war rig and you know, they're being attacked, and it's just it's a Mad Max style scene, right? It extends in my mind at least for like 10 or 15 minutes, and it's just like nonstop action. And there are a few things like that where it just gets very, very amazing. But then in between, it really feels like George Miller took that and combined it with almost like 3,000 years of longing. Like, there's a lot in this movie that feels like the making of a myth. I won't spoil the ending, but it ends with a scene that I feel like could literally have been in 3,000 Years of Longing, and it feels like that combination of an action spectacle and a campy thing like one of the Mad Max sequels in the 80s and this kind of grand mythology, I found it totally charming and delightful. Like nowhere near as perfect as Mad Max Fury Road, but I thought it was a very, very good sequel. I teased something in our Cannes review, which is that I thought the villain in this movie, played by Chris Hemsworth, was a human version of Proximus Caesar from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I stand by that. And one thing I'm going to be curious about when you tell me what you think is, do you agree? Because I feel like he is 100% that kind of goofy, self-possessed, believes he is like incredibly smart and erudite, but then he's also actually just a kind of like vicious leader who's going to do anything he can to survive. And I think he nails the assignment. I mentioned all of the Mad Max movies in preparation for this, and there are villains, especially in Mad Max Road Warrior, the second installment, that are as ridiculous and goofy as this guy is. And I like it. I like, because I hadn't seen a trailer, I assumed Chris Hemsworth was going to be like a good guy alongside Anya Taylor-Joy, and this was going to be like the two of them riding off together Mad Max style. And when I saw him with his nose and his demeanor and his everything in this movie, for the first few minutes I was like, what the fuck is George Miller doing? But I wound up really loving it. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with Furiosa. How about you?
I mean, I'll go to your question first, which, like going into the film, I had that conversation in the back of my mind, and I'm like, I don't know, we'll see. And like, he also has his own William H. Macy character.
Yes.
So
I didn't want to spoil that, but yes.
Okay, yeah. So the comparisons are, it goes beyond just the performance, and it goes to like the entire setup of the characters. But yeah, I mean, he's clearly a similar type of person who seems to like want to try to use knowledge of the past as like a way to understand the present and like better his people by incorporating all this information that he has from the past. So those kind of things had a lot of overlap. And I thought I did think it was pretty funny because like I was ready to not be on the same page as you there, and then I was like, oh, this is kind of sillily on the same page.
I mean, he not only also has a William H. Macy, but he also has a young girl who joins William H. Macy and is meant to be like the success that, it goes pretty deep, I feel like.
Yeah. But yeah, so now going back to my thoughts on the film, I love this film. I'm going to get my one nitpick out of the way right at the beginning so that I can just talk about the stuff that I really, really enjoyed about it. But, this is a film that is attempting to expand the universe of Mad Max, at least specifically Fury Road. But in a weird way, I think it kind of works in the opposite direction for me in a way, because like in the first film, when we see like the depiction of the Citadel, I feel in the first film that I'm just watching a tiny piece of the world. And this film, in attempting to expand, it kind of makes me feel like the world is actually smaller than I imagined, because I was imagining I was just carving off a little tiny piece to look at. And this kind of goes like, no, this is kind of just everything.
So you imagined the Citadel being like, it's like the gate of Mordor, and then there's a whole Mordor behind it or something that is like the whole land that he possesses.
Yeah. Or it's like the Citadel is Mordor and the desert around it is Mordor, but then there's also the Shire and there's like all these other parts to Middle Earth. But this film kind of depicts it as though it's all just Mordor. And to be fair, I don't think we ever saw this before, but the film opens with like a zoom down from space, and we are self-contained in Australia, it feels like.
Right.
So one could extrapolate from there and be like, well, they're all landlocked.
Oh, that's why they're talking that way.
but anyways, but like, we could say that like they are on a smaller version of the rest of the world because they're all landlocked to just Australia. But it still felt like kind of like for me, it felt like everything the universe sort of shrunk a bit and felt like the only things that existed were the Citadel, the gas town, and the bullet farm, and then I guess the green place. But we kind of learn in Fury Road that the green place sort of doesn't exist anymore. So it's like it sort of, there was something about it that made me go like, huh, why does everything feel smaller now that we've expanded it open? But that's not a really huge complaint for me, because the rest of the expansion of what it does is just so exciting and so brilliant. And I think that like even in the action scenes, which, as you said, don't necessarily stand up to the excitement and like the sort of Cirque du Soleil experience that some of those action scenes were in Fury Road. What you do get is a more better understanding of the reality of the world people live in. Like, if two people are running away from somebody else and something happens to one of those people, in a normal action film, you'd be like, "Oh no, they got Bill," right? And you'd keep going. But in this world, even if you've lost the person, the hardware that makes up their bike is more important to turn around, stop, try to offload anything that you can do, and then try to run, right? Like, there's so much time spent in showing how, like, characters don't feel like they're in costume. They feel like they belong in this world, and the things that they care about, like, not just water and food, but like the hardware and the way that is the most important thing to them, that really comes out in this film in a way that, you know, was present in Fury Road, but not to the level that you see it in this. This feels like a more lived-in world. There's a big montage that happens in the middle of the film that sort of portrays a long, prolonged battle, and like seeing not just like the like, it's not about seeing devastation, right? It's about seeing the resources that have been spent to maintain that sort of that prolonged conflict. And I just, there was something about that really drew me in. I had been prepped by you in your earlier coverage that Furiosa, adult Furiosa, Anya Taylor-Joy, was not going to be present for a while in this film, so I was prepared for that. But what I wasn't prepared for was kind of liking the kid version of Furiosa more.
She's good.
Like,
she's really good.
Like everything when she's a child, everything with the people that she lives with, the other characters that were like briefly introduced before she's sort of taken, all that shit was badass. Like, I really, really enjoyed that time, and I kind of wish we could spend more time there. But obviously, this film is racing towards being this story of like, how did we get to where the other film is going to be? So it was kind of a I thought all the other time that was spent there was actually a very happy welcome space to be in, and I was like stoked about all that kind of stuff. I mean, Chris Hemsworth is doing amazing work in this film.
So because I was wondering, I thought you would have fun with him, but I thought maybe the part of you that cares about reality in a universe wouldn't like how ridiculously campy he is half the time. Like, how did you mesh the humor of his character with the coolness of the world? Like, did that bother you, or that you were into it?
So the reason why it's fine for me, like, first of all, I was into it, and part of why I'm into it is because the world itself is already so goofy, right? It is a weird, strange world, but he is the character. Like, he's not exactly like a Deadpool character. Like, he's not breaking the fourth wall, but he is realizing that there is inherent goofiness in all the people, and he's just in on it. Like, his character in the universe is in on how goofy the rest of the world is, and he is just playing to that as a strength, as opposed to just like, you know, because the other characters, you're kind of meant to laugh at their ignorance and their stupidity and their just weird, goofy demeanors, like, you know, Scrotus and Rectus or whatever their names are. Like,
love those names. Yeah.
Like, you know, you are there to sort of like laugh at them a little bit. Dementus is sort of, he's laughing at the world and he's laughing at himself, and he's sort of enjoying whatever's happening, even if it's weird. And he has that sort of like, you know, like he thinks, you know, if things aren't going his way, he has this thing about him that is kind of like, well, I'm going to take my shit and I'm going to leave. You know, like he has this weird kind of like manic energy to him that is just, I found it very, very fun and enjoyable. So
nice. Yeah, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the movie's a lot of fun. You mentioned that it is, you know, you really liked the younger Furiosa and you would have appreciated even more time, but the movie's kind of racing towards telling us where it's going. And I think that's one of the really cool things about this movie is it, on paper, this is a kind of sprawling story. And if you said the first hour is just young Furiosa, and it's like she's been taken and we're going to watch her live her life before the events of Mad Max, it would kind of sound like that would be lacking in momentum. You know, it would kind of feel like, oh, you're hoping I invest in this character and making a kind of drama or something. But it isn't. Like, the movie's pace is very kinetic, and it is very easy to follow, even as it does like time jump. And I think that is something that I would not have expected from a prequel, is to have it cover a kind of long swath of time and still have it feel propulsive and exciting. Like this isn't primarily an action movie, I don't think. I'd say it's more of like an adventure movie. But it is cut like an action movie in the sense that it always feels like it is getting to the next cool thing that is going to happen. And I think that is why it kept my attention so well, even though my brain was already completely swimming by the time I sat down to watch it.
Let's see. Yeah, I do like the presentation of sort of like the different factions, or I should say like combat styles that we have from the different groups. Because, you know, in the first film, it was kind of like you were escaping from one location, so you were mostly encountering the people from that location. Right. So the whatever boys, whatever they're called.
The War Boys?
Yeah, the War Boys. And they're like, they're pretty suicidal attack patterns and stuff like that. And that was your experience. But like getting to see these moments where you have people on different type of vehicles that we haven't seen really, including like some wild I'm gonna equate it to like the giant inflatable flailing arm tube men. Like there's at least
I don't
one...
know if I remember what you're talking about there. That might be when the jet lag started.
There's one vehicle that it's not quite a kite, but it has long tentacle-y type things.
Oh yes, yeah. It looks like an octopus almost.
Yeah. That shit is like so cool, and I don't like. Would you build that? If you like, I don't know, but it looks rad as hell. And I guess if you hadn't seen something like that before and you were like getting ready to come fight with some people in the middle of the desert and then you saw that shit coming around the corner, you would at least be sort of like scared a little bit, right? Like it feels like that's a pretty impressive visual
it's very
thing.
Looming. Yeah, I do. One thing I would have loved to see backstory for that we don't see is the guitar guys whose only job is to like wail on the guitar in the middle of a war. I would have loved to see where they come from and what they do, because I feel like they have a similar purpose to that like floating thing where it's just meant to like intimidate other people.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the Civil War era, right? Where like you have the people that are just like marching on the drums to like make sure people go do their thing or whatever. So I feel like it's just a version of that, just way cooler.
One thing I didn't look up, but I was wondering, is I remember that we do see a specific war boy in this movie, and is that the same war boy from Fury Road? Like I didn't actually look up the cast, so I don't know if that was yet another prequel that we were seeing. Like if that was Nicholas Hoult showing up again in this movie, or if that was just like a random war boy that we see, because it lingered on him for a while, like longer than I would have expected for a random side character. But I can literally just Google it right now and find out.
Yeah. Was he a younger one that we assume grows into Nicholas Hoult?
It looks like Nicholas Hoult is in this movie.
Okay.
Yeah, so I assume, because the thing is, and hopefully this won't be too spoilery, the final maybe like 45 minutes of this movie takes place very, very shortly before Fury Road is supposed to take place. So I'm pretty sure all characters are meant to be those characters, not even like significantly younger versions. Just like you suspend your disbelief and kind of assume that Anya Taylor-Joy snaps her fingers and becomes Charlize Theron. But other than that, everyone is basically playing the same character in almost the same time frame that they are in Fury Road.
Yeah. So, any last thoughts about this film, Stephen?
Not really. Just that I had a fucking blast. And one thing I love about all of the Mad Max movies, even the ridiculous 80s ones, which I feel like those would be a bridge too far for you to enjoy. Like, they're real silly.
Like compared to Roadhouse, how silly are they?
I would say Beyond the Thunderdome is like Roadhouse levels of silly.
Okay.
Yeah. That one, I would say the villains in that movie are like almost like the bad guy in Roadhouse. The second movie, Road Warrior, a little less ridiculous than Roadhouse. But one thing I've loved about all of them is the clans of bad guys are they're all very goofy. They're like very punk rock. They have this kind of flashy, kind of flamboyant aesthetic where they like dress a certain way. You know, there's Nipple Clamp Man in this movie, but there's tons of people that just look kind of ridiculous. And I always enjoyed that, the kind of the cosplay element of this universe. And I feel like this movie makes that really fun. Like, we get a lot more time with Immortan Joe's crew than we do in Fury Road, right? We get to see all of his sons, like Scrotus and Rectus, and his collaborators and stuff. And I always enjoy getting to spend time with them, because I really think the kind of the genius of these movies is they manage to be incredibly ridiculously goofy while also being cool as fuck. And it's just amazing that even when you shine like a magnifying glass on these characters, it still holds up, and the combination of goofiness and cool as fuck still works. You could imagine it not working at all. Like, there are so many ways this movie could have been a complete disaster. And the fact that it isn't, and the fact that I am happy to watch more movies if he decides to keep deepening this prequel verse, or however he wants to structure it, is, to me, says a lot, because this is not my jam at all. Like, this is not the kind of thing that I would expect to like.
Do you think that he's going to follow the pattern? So if Fury Road introduced us to Furiosa, and then this...
Now it's going to be Osa?
No. So Fury Road introduced us to Furiosa. The Furiosa film introduced us to Dementis. Is this going to be Dementis' prequel story? And it introduces us to another character, and it just keeps going further back in time until like the first nukes go off that like screw up the world or something.
That would be amazing. But I assume he's going to do a Max one. That would be my guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, I do recommend, for anyone who wants to have fun, go do a binge of all the other Mad Max movies. I'll give you one guess what streaming service it's on.
Is it Max?
It sure is.
Nice.
Yeah, that tickled me.
This is the real reason all the stupid naming happened over the last several years. It was all a move to get them to Max.
Yeah, they were all trying to cash in on Furiosa, which unfortunately disappointed in the box office. But
yeah.
I don't think it's due to the quality of the movie at all. I think anyone who sees this movie is going to have a fucking blast with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I don't see why you would go see this film and not enjoy it. Like, sure, maybe you don't like it as much as Fury Road, or maybe you didn't see Fury Road and you're like, oh, that's like an interesting movie. But I feel like there's so much visual spectacle and excitement that you're watching. Like, I guess if you're just really, really turned off by Immortan Joe's crew and like weird people in the film, then maybe that would turn you away, I guess, if that's just something that's like a bridge too far for you. But I feel like the average person walking in is going to have an amazing time.
Cool.
All right. Should we get to verdicts?
Sure.
All right, Steven, if you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm going to give it a must-see. I think this, even though this is not as good as Mad Max Fury Road, right? Like, I think this is merely just a very good movie. It isn't like a genre-defining movie or anything like that. I think it is a fucking awesome prequel, and I've almost never said awesome prequel in my life before, because that is not a thing that is easy to pull off. I think this is a really fun movie in its own right. It not only doesn't ruin Fury Road, I think it actually makes it stronger. Like, rewatching Fury Road, I think would be a lot of fun now with the extra deepening that you've had for all the characters and stuff. And yeah, I just think it is a shockingly good movie that had no right to be good. So wholeheartedly endorse.
Yeah, it's a must-see from me as well. I was super excited for it, and it did not disappoint. It is kind of funny, though, that like films like this that have a lot of that weirdness to it, if you just jump to a random scene in the middle, it feels like this movie is nonsense. Like I was like, on the Apple TV kind of clicking around, and then I saw like, oh, Fury Road is only $7, and I was like, oh, I should buy this. And I clicked to buy it, and it just started playing the film, and I was like, oh, I must have already bought it already. But I was like, scroll, and I just picked a random action scene, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? None of this makes sense. And it's like, when you're watching the film in the context, it all feels super serious and like you get it and like everything is cool. But like just jumping to a random scene in the film, you're just like, what am I watching?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I was skeptical when I was rewatching it too, because it started and I was like, this is going to be weird, right? Like 2015 was just a weird year, right? Everyone was high. Like everyone was just so excited. But then when you go through it, you're just like, holy fuck, this is amazing. Yeah. But I can totally imagine skipping through it and being like, what the hell is going on? But that's the magic trick George Miller pulls off, is he doesn't take himself seriously at all, and yet the movies feel incredibly serious and cool. And I think that is a very impressive combo to pull off.
All right. Well, that is probably going to do it for our review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Stephen Miller, people want to find you throughout the week. Where can they do that?
People can find me on Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller, sdavidmiller.com, or I've been writing on Substack at Decoding Everything for the last couple weeks.
People can find me at ChristopherInALife.com or ChristopherIRL at a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. That music's playing now. We are going to take a quick breather and then go off to record part end of
Part D.
Steven's can coverage. And then we'll be back mostly to a normal schedule for about a week or two. I will be gone for 2.5 weeks shortly after that, so we'll kind of see what we can get ready for y'all. But you might have a little window of time where the feeds might be dormant again. But we'll be back to the full thing soon, so look forward to that, and we will see you over there. Bye.
Bye.